Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Peter Stark, and I'm the Rehearsal Director of the European Union Youth Orchestra. We are currently on our digital residency for the summer of 2020 and having a great time. This session is a public session, and we're going to talk about auditions. Now, auditions are something that all musicians have to go through. They are something of a nightmare, and all musicians hate them. We don't like auditioning for an orchestral position because we don't usually play on our own. But across the world, there are very, very many different audition formats. And so what we want to do is to have a discussion, which you are very welcome to join, about what happens, what you are expected to play, how you're expected to appear, and what we are looking for as panel members. We will finish this session with a question and answer section. So if you have any questions whilst we're talking, please type them in. The comments will come through to me, and I will be able to bring them into the conversation as we go. So at any time during this session, please write your questions. We're very interested to hear from you. And we are extremely lucky to have with us two eminent musicians. They are both concert masters. The reason we've chosen concert masters is because they audition all sections. So the first person I would like to introduce you to is Laura Samuel. Laura, I have known for many years. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Peter.
She was born in London and she studied at the Royal College of Music in London with Itzhak Rashkovsky. She was a founder member of the Belcher String Quartet, with whom she played for 16 years. She was also a member of the Nash Ensemble. She is now leader of the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra and a professor of violin at the Royal Scottish Academy. Our other guest is Guy Braunstein. Guy was born in Israel and he studied, hi Guy, he studied in America with Pinchas Zuckerman. He is a soloist and conductor, but he then became the first concertmaster of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra from 2000 to 2013. He's now a soloist, conductor, and festival director. Welcome, Guy.
Great to be here.
I'm going to start this off by asking you both, what do you look for in an orchestral audition? What are the qualities you're looking for in a candidate? Let's start with Laura.
Well, I mean, everyone has a real idea of what they want to hear in an audition. Personally, I want to hear a complete audition. Hopefully by the choices they've made about what they present to you repertoire-wise, you get a good idea about how a musician plays classical things right through to present day. And then, of course, when we get onto the excerpts, you get a really strong idea of how the musician is as a whole, really. So it's a very short period of time to really make a mark in an audition. And I think that you instantly feel whether you want to hear someone again based on the first few moments.
Thank you. And Guy?
For me, I just ignore the fact that I'm trying to accept somebody into a big ensemble like an orchestra. I just see a person and immediately I try to imagine, do I want to play a Schubert octet with them? Do I want to play a Brahms string quintet with them, or clarinet quintet, or whatever? Yes or no? It's as simple as that. Because we all, especially me, in a big ensemble like an orchestra, I just look for the optimal chamber musicians. So it's great to see somebody that is a founding member of the very, very, very best string quartet that we have in our time, by far.
Yes.
So probably your input would be much more straightforward. But I just try to find my favorite quartet members.
It's very interesting because
regardless if they are playing violin, viola, cello, or trombone.
Yeah, in spring, we had a conversation with Ivan Fischer of the Budapest Festival Orchestra. And Ivan was, we asked him a similar question, and he was talking about wanting to find imagination. He was saying that in the players that he seeks for his orchestra, he always wants people who have imagination, who have musical idea. And it's very interesting because I think quite a lot of people sort of feel that actually all the panel are looking for is that you play your instrument well. But it's far more than that, isn't it?
Certainly, and I think you can get so hung up on it being perfect, or thinking that you can try and preempt what the panel or the musicians want to hear. But actually, you've just got to be true to yourself, I think, and you can't try and be the right person for every job or every scenario. But I think Guy is so right that often people think of themselves particularly as orchestral musicians or as a certain type of player, but actually all the same elements are relevant wherever you are. You need fantastic awareness and antennae, and I think the very best orchestras, you know, have such fantastic connections all around the space and between every single player. So I think that's something that is really, you're trying to find in a situation which is quite unnatural because they're often playing on their own or with a pianist in an audition. So you're trying to work out whether those things really are present in that particular person.
So if you are looking for a large-scale chamber musician, in effect, you're looking for somebody who has the ability to work with other people. A question may be asked, how on earth do you tell that with an individual playing on their own? I mean, of course, there is the movement, the concerto movement or the solo piece, if it's accompanied by a pianist, and you can see if there's interreaction with the accompanist, which in my experience of auditioning is very often missing. So they seem to use the accompanist as just background music almost. Whereas the auditions for me that stand out are the ones where you can actually see and feel the player interacting with the accompanist. Let's take that on to orchestral excerpts. When you're playing a single voice from a large scale work, maybe it's a solo, maybe it's an ensemble passage, maybe it's even an accompanying passage. Can you feel as a panel member the rest of the score in the room, as it were? Guy?
There is no difference between this and playing string quartet, as we all know. There is absolutely nothing in particular that one should think about. Why somebody should think about an orchestra. You know, the good player could play a Bach solo movement, and we can all imagine we can all have the imaginary bass line and the imaginary counterpoint and imaginary everything. You just know it. You just know it. Now, let me jump back into all you people sometimes being afraid of making mistakes, and let me just give you a little anecdote from one of my first years in Berlin. We were sitting auditioning for the first violin group, and came a girl, and she played the Beethoven violin concerto, and you know, very, very close to the beginning, maybe at the 5th or 6th bar of the solo entrance, she had such a blackout, and she started going, you know, instead of in D major, she went into tonalities that even Schoenberg never imagined. Only God knows what kind of quarter notes she was going on for another bar, another bar, another bar, another bar. We were all smiling. We were all smiling quietly. Just to as a spoiler, of course, she won the position over everybody else. It just doesn't fucking matter. We are all humans. We make mistakes, and this is part of it. It's the story that you manage to tell, you know, with more on some days you'll be luckier and make less mistakes, and some other days we're less lucky. But if you manage to tell the story and to give us the bad guys, you know, the impression that you know what is around you, even if it's only in the imagination in that particular moment. You got it. You got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all make it.
I do think there's a really pertinent point is that the panel will know whether it's just simply a mistake. I mean, let's call it a memory slip, for example. You can tell if it's a memory slip, and you won't charge anybody with a memory slip in an orchestral audition, because unless you play for very few orchestras, you will always have music. So a memory slip doesn't matter at all. But actually, you can make quite a difference by the way you deal with that mistake, by the way you accommodate the mistakes that we all make into your audition. And actually, does it really tell the panel that you are not a very good player? And the answer is it doesn't. But how you manage the situation of the mistake is very important, I think.
Sure. I mean, you can be the biggest soloist or the most professional experienced soloist of all time and make stupid mistakes.
Yes.
And that's not going to determine who you are or how you tell the story. Shit happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can you do? What can you do? It happens to the best and it happens to the rest. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
I think it's
Laura.
so obvious well when there's a really fine musician, but just not feeling particularly comfortable on that day. I mean, it doesn't detract from all the things they have to say, even if you know they might not even be giving it their best, I think. I mean, I've had situations in my orchestra with excerpts where I've just asked someone if they wanted to play it again. I don't know how common that is because I haven't really been involved in many auditions, but I think just doing it for a second time is also a very natural scenario. You know, in a rehearsal situation, you don't play something once and then change 200 years to a completely different composer. You often have, you know, your chance to feel your way, or you would do it differently, or you would adapt or change things. So I'm quite happy to hear someone play it, you know, a few times until they give something that they're really satisfied with. I think that's real life and that's normal. I'd much rather hear that than hear someone struggle through something, not find their way, and then move them on to something else very quickly.
Yes, and you know, it's very interesting because the idea of doing something for a second time immediately reduces the level of nerves. It certainly did with me as a player, that if somebody asked me to do something for a second time, I go, okay, fine, I've got another chance. It's okay, it's all right. Now, I think for some people, being asked to do something again would actually raise the anxiety levels, because they'd say, oh God, why have I got to do it again? What was wrong with the first time? I thought it was all right. And so it's such a sort of odd situation, isn't it? But it is the only way we can judge in any way the people that we don't know. You know, actually, you have to hear them in audition. What I wanted as a violinist was just to be plonked in an orchestra to get on with it, and then I would have been fine. But actually sticking me in front of a group of old, crusty people with sour expressions on their faces, it tore me to pieces. I hated it. But it is very, very interesting how we deal with it. How important? Well, yeah.
I'm sorry, you know, I mean, auditions are like democracy. It's a terrible, terrible idea, but we still haven't found a better one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. We haven't found a better one. Another question: how important do you think is the choice of repertoire? What views do you have about the repertoire, assuming that the audition is free choice and not required? When you are choosing repertoire to play in an audition, how important is your choice of repertoire? Laura?
Oh, me. Look, I'm a strange animal. You know, during my years in Berlin Philharmonic, I was trying to convince the other members of the orchestra to stop imposing pieces and stop telling people play this or play that, and just say, come and play for 20 minutes, whatever you feel is going to represent your personality the best. But of course, they refused to take my advice, and therefore, every string player and every wind player would have to play a classical concerto, being followed by, you know. Personally, I don't give a damn. If you feel like you can show your personality better with the Mozart concerto or with the Schubert Fantasy, be my guest. It's like it's like I would like to have the same judgment like when I go to hear somebody's recital, you know, playing the things that he thinks will show his personality the best and would give the best
We've lost him temporarily. Laura, did you have anything? He's frozen. We'll come back.
I agree with Guy, absolutely. I mean, I really like to have a broader repertoire choice as possible, so that actually people come and present what they think shows them off to their best. I was slightly alarmed. We had we still do have a principal bass vacancy, solo bass in our orchestra, and it was very specific concertos to play. And I know, of course, their repertoire isn't as big as the violin or piano or whatever, but I still think that you're really narrowing down things if you ask someone to bring a particular piece. I personally think I want to hear someone play something that they're totally engaged with and that they love and that they think shows them to their best. And then if you have any sort of queries about that choice or any question marks in your mind after they've played their own choice, you can always fill in the gaps with excerpts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Choices. So if you feel particularly that you would maybe like a richer, deeper sound, then you would choose an excerpt that might show that off. Or if you felt particularly that the lighter side or classical side was maybe not shown so much and you might have had a doubt about whether that was present in a player, then you would just pick, you know, a Mendelssohn or a lighter excerpt in that way. So I think my advice would be, of course, it's so different in different settings, and some people, like Guy says, do have very restricted repertoire choices, but I think present what you think shows you to your absolute best.
Yeah. There is a question here from Aidan, which I want to mention because I think it's a very pertinent question. The question of repeating an excerpt or indeed a piece. Would you accept a candidate, his question, would you accept a candidate asking to repeat an excerpt? So if a candidate plays something, they want to have another go at it, would you accept the candidate asking to repeat?
I personally would. I mean, it's not always easy to say that you could definitely do that with time constraints, or if you really felt that you wanted to hear a different kind of repertoire, you might have to move the audition on in a different way. But I think, you know, absolutely, if it's at all possible, it's really nice. I mean, there's such unnatural things. We've all been in situations where you've been hanging around outside, cold, and having to play things in a way, as we said earlier, that is just not necessarily like real life. So I think anything that eases someone into feeling more comfortable in a situation is, of course, always, you're going to try and accommodate that.
Yeah, thank you. Guy, would you accept a candidate asking to repeat an excerpt?
I would accept anything that would make them feel more wanted and comfortable and happy. Anything whatsoever. Anything whatsoever. Because we all know that they're a little bit away from their comfort zone, like the rest of us. And whatever can get you a little bit closer to that, I will be very happily willing to accept.
Thank you. I mean, just before we leave that repetition idea, I also think anybody who's watching who is contemplating or who is auditioning for orchestras at the moment, if the panel themselves ask you to repeat an excerpt, don't necessarily think it's because you did it wrong or you did it badly. Just take the request on face value and do what they ask. They might ask you to do it a little bit lighter, a little bit more off the string, a little bit more projected if it's a woodwind solo, a little bit change sound quality for a brass player, all of that sort of stuff. If they ask you to do that, it is not necessarily a criticism. It's not necessarily a criticism. So no, I personally...
Yeah, you just try to have a better idea of the abilities that they can have.
Absolutely. And also,
it was so fantastic, amazed me again in a different way.
Yeah, and as a panel member, the one thing the one thing it teaches me as a panel member is if you ask somebody to do something a second time, it can inform you to their flexibility and their ability to change and their ability to work in a different way, which is good information all on its own. There's another question from dear familiar Colin Window, who says, what are your thoughts on how people dress for an audition? Do you think the presentation that you present, is it important?
Look at me. You see?
Yes.
Is that, I'm seriously the wrong person to ask. Come butt naked if you like. I mean,
okay, fine.
I couldn't care less.
That's your answer, Laura?
I think you should wear whatever makes you feel most comfortable in that situation. Some people like putting on a different kind of clothing or shoes or something that makes them feel more like it's a sense of occasion, and they're therefore in a way they might do for a concert. That's absolutely fine. I think you get a sense of whether or not someone's taking it seriously by their playing, by their attitude, and very, very little to do with what they wear. Yes,
I mean, I have to say, I have seen everything from Evening Tale, everything from Evening Tale to a see-through dress. I mean, everything. And so I think the answer, it's whatever you are most comfortable in, is probably the best one. I personally, old-fashioned, I'm of a certain age, I like people to respect the situation. But it really makes no difference to the playing as far as that is concerned. I absolutely agree.
Peter, thanks God I never had to audition for you.
You wouldn't have got the job.
I come sometimes, it's not out of lack of respect, but I'm such a tramp. I sometimes come to rehearsing as a conductor to rehearse with the Philharmonic Orchestra or Symphony Orchestra. And you can see what I had for breakfast, or worse, even if my baby had a bad stomach. No, look, I think to just generalize the whole idea. My strong advice to you is never try to please anybody or everybody. Not with how you dress and not with how you play. That's the wrong turn to take. Don't try to please everybody, because you'll end up pleasing nobody.
Yes, absolutely right. You just present yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is no necessity to think about anybody else. I know. Look, I've recognized some people that came to audition for concertmeister position in Berlin, and I could actually tell that they heard my recording of Brahms concerto, or they saw my video of Brahms concerto and tried to please me. That's a bad. I'll tell you, bad idea.
Yeah.
That's not you. If it's not genuine, if it's not you, the best copy in the world is just a copy.
Yes, and you will. The panel will know if you're trying to put on a face, trying to put on something. Sure. It's very obvious. Yeah.
I think also, from my experience, I've had people come in looking very smart, for example, but they completely disrespectful in so many ways. Like they won't have really prepared themselves properly. I'm not talking about feeling comfortable or having a good day. They take the mick in lots of other different ways, and yet they think they present themselves very well. And vice versa, you can have someone who's just looking comfortable and casual and is taking it incredibly seriously. So,
yeah. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely. There's another good question here from Julia Tramnitz. She says, do you have good preparation strategy? What helped you most to feel comfortable with audition situation? How I am very, very interested in what happens in the warm-up room, in the same way that I'm very interested in what happens in the practice room. So if I'm maybe allowed my opinion before I ask you yours, I think the preparation in a warm-up room, it's far too late to try and perfect the difficult passage, or just play the bit that troubles you most, the bit that you're most anxious about. The preparation or the warm-up and the practice room is much more a mental activity than it is a physical activity. And so in the preparation room, for me, you should relax. You should, if you're a wind player, you should breathe deeply. If you're a string player, you should free your arms, but everybody should free their heads. And so for me, the right preparation is the same sort of preparation as I do before I go on to conduct a performance, is I don't fret about the difficult bits, the bits I'm worried about. I actually just consciously relax. And so that is my answer. The preparation strategy is very different for me from actually warming up your fingers or whatever or your tongue to do acrobatics. But over to you two. What do you feel about preparation procedure?
I think, of course, everyone is so different. I think, we're musicians. All our life, we feel like we're not prepared enough. I mean, that's just the reality. So whatever you've done in terms of preparing for something, we all know that we might not have done enough. That's just a lifetime's work, really. So I personally find it useful. I know it's going to be a really stressful situation. So I like to try and make myself as stressed as I possibly can in the weeks leading up to something like that, whether it's an audition or any sort of performance that I know will cause me a lot of anxiety. So that involves playing maybe to musicians or friends that I really respect, that will make me feel quite scared already, that will give me good feedback. I think also, particularly in an audition situation, you're thrown from so many different situations in terms of repertoire that's actually quite useful to have different people throw that at you beforehand. So, for example, something like 4 days beforehand, I would really like to go and play to a fellow friend who would just ask for things in different orders, and just make me feel quite similar to how I might feel in the actual audition process.
Yeah. Guy?
Julia, look, I can only tell you about the one time I auditioned in my life, and that was for the Concertmeistership of Berlin Philharmonic. Now, half hour before beginning of the audition, all the other candidates were in every possible dressing room, perfecting, preparing, tuning, whatever. I was on the terrace smoking weed, and actually, and I had way too many espressos, but because I always do, and I just played like I play every day at home. And the more you are familiar with the situation, the more comfortable you are. Just do what you do every day. Don't prepare for a special day, because then it becomes special. It shouldn't become special. It should become like any day that you are at home, and then you won't find yourself in an unfamiliar territory. Whatever habits you have every day, just keep doing that. Keep doing that. There is nothing special about it. You always, people that get nervous, they always keep saying, "Oh well, it sounded so good at home." Well, obviously, you have eaten differently. You have eaten differently. You have prepared differently. You have slept differently, and you gave it way too much thought. Just stay in your comfort zone. And if you always before you go to practice or to perform a class concert or whatever, if you always have a double espresso, please do exactly the same and eat the same, and don't think about it as an unusual preparation. Whatever makes it unusual will get in your way.
Thank you.
Just stay whatever makes you comfortable on a very normal day.
And a question from Angel Martin. What do you think is the best choice regarding the solo piece performance? Playing it by heart or with the music? I know what my answer is.
I don't mind at all.
Doesn't matter.
No preference at all. Whatever you
It
want.
doesn't matter. Yeah,
Some
absolutely.
people play really freely with music. Some people play incredibly freely with music because that's what they like. And some people play freely without music, just whatever. Doesn't even come on my radar whether or not one is more preferable than the other.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all nodding there. Yes, Guy?
Nothing to add. No, I mean, it doesn't matter whatsoever. Doesn't matter at all.
The only time situation I would disagree with is if you use the music to hide behind. So in other words, if you play through the music because you don't want to open to the room. So if you have the music there, it doesn't matter at all, but still play to the room. I think that's very important. But it doesn't make any difference. What about sight reading? What do we think is the value of sight reading? Do you have sight reading in BBC Scottish?
We don't actually, no. I mean, the thing is, in real life, you very rarely have to sight read anything. You have to do all sorts of other things like learn things very quickly and adapt very quickly. But actually reading purely from sight is very, very rare. Only happens if you probably haven't done your homework, maybe. But I personally, I'd be interested to hear what you two think about this. I have a real theory about sight reading as well, because the few times I've had to watch people sight read in front of me, I think if you're particularly aware and listening a lot to what you're doing, you can often be really disturbed by things that are happening when you sight read. So that for me is not a natural situation. If I wanted to hear someone sight read, for example, I would play with them and with two colleagues. So we were sight reading with four of us, because that's a natural situation. And then you blend with each other and you read and all those kind of alert things to do with sight reading. But actually playing the notes from a page blind, if you're really listening to yourself, that can be very distressing.
Yeah.
And it often puts people off in a way that in a situation with people around you, you keep going, or you notice things differently. And so I personally don't see very much value at all in individual sight reading, but I know a lot of orchestras do ask for it.
Still do, yeah. Guy?
Still do.
Yeah.
I don't see any benefit of checking people's sight. This is like going with them into the bathroom. This is a private zone. They should come prepared, and if they sight read or they have been preparing the part for two full weeks, days and nights, that's their own business. That's their private part. As long as they come ready, I couldn't care less if they sight read or they have prepared. I don't see any benefit. I mean, for me, I used to come a lot and sight read in the program during the first rehearsal, but most people took the music home. Some people were so slow learning their parts that they used to go to the library weeks before, months before. Yeah. But this is private parts. It's
yes, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. For me, it serves no purpose at all. I think certainly I'm interested in the international perspective, because in the UK, I think sight reading was for a long time felt to be necessary, because UK orchestras have to sight read so much. Some of the orchestras do vast programs on almost no rehearsal, and it's a sort of singular thing that UK orchestras do. On the continent and further afield, the orchestras usually have considerable numbers of rehearsals to work on a program before they perform them. But in the UK, you turn up at 3 o'clock on the day that you're going to perform in the evening, not having ever played the pieces before. But I think generally sight reading is being dropped. Sorry, Guy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know of obviously I've been in the UK to play violin concertos with a lot of the orchestras, and I know that the preparation is like always being done at the last moment with very little rehearsing time, but still has nothing to do with sight reading.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's absolutely right.
How quick you are to interact with others. Some people could immediately in the first rehearsal they immediately they can interact with other voices very quickly and find their place. But again, this has nothing to do with sight reading your own part.
Yes. No, I don't. I love this question. This is, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, Gosia, who says about dynamics in orchestral excerpts. And this is a question that really interests me. How quiet do you play an orchestral excerpt? Do you play it at the dynamic that you will need to play it when you're in orchestra, or do you play it at a dynamic that is suitable for a solo person in that room? I love this question. I think it's very, very valuable.
I have to tell you, I hate this question because you know, I'm sorry, Gosia, but having played in an orchestra for 13 years and having played quartets for 20 years and having played solo, I just don't see the difference between orchestra solo playing and quartet playing and you name it. I just don't see the difference. I used to just bring the same myself in every situation. So so don't think there should be any difference between a solo pianissimo or piano and an orchestra piano.
Yeah, and Laura, for you?
You have to present the color. You have to present the color. And people say whenever you have solo, you should play more. Bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not true. It's not true. You should create this intimate feeling that people that sit far away from you, they pretend that they come closer to you. You shouldn't come to them.
Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, I think it's a great question as well. I can only imagine that maybe what Gosia is getting at is that sometimes there's an expectation that you project everything in a way when you're playing on your own and in a way that you don't. But as Guy says, I mean, you play for the music, you play the color, you play what the sentiment of the music is. And that, you know, I mean, in this situation where you've played, for example, a concerto, you know, it's great to hear someone play very, very intimately and very quietly as well. So I wouldn't for any reason think that you had to project everything. Quite the opposite. You want to show a broader range as you possibly can. And I totally agree with Guy that quartet piano, orchestra piano, solo piano, whatever, they're all, you know, we get so hung up in compartmentalizing things, don't we? It's all music and it's all playing the, you know, your instrument and trying to say something through that.
One thing that might help is when you're talking about dynamics, is not to fall into the trap of thinking dynamic is volume. So that if you think dynamic is volume, when you play very, very quiet, that is a volume. But you can play pianissimo without particularly playing quietly. So the concept, the imagination behind the pianissimo is I think what you should achieve, and then it doesn't matter how loud it is. So it is a great question. And from Santiago, Santiago says, what are you exactly looking for when you listen to a Mozart concerto or another classical concerto on the first round of an audition? Is there any difference listening on the panel with the other rounds? In other words, what are we looking for in a classical concerto?
Well, look, never forget. Look, I understand why orchestras always ask for a Mozart or a classical concerto or a Haydn cello concerto in the first round. Like in violin competitions, they always ask for Bach and Paganini because they want to make you feel naked. Yeah. And it's very, very easy to make a selection because you're really naked. You're really naked.
Yes.
You cannot protect yourself and you cannot cover your whatever private parts. Everything is very clear and very obvious to the people looking at you and listening to you. I can tell you, for example, maybe it's a coincidence, but from every 100 people that play the Mozart concerto in auditions that I would listen to, 99 of them, they just play too fast.
Thank you.
99 of 100. Maybe it's a coincidence, but I'm not sure it is. they all rush the 16th to this kind of speed that a soprano coloratura would never be able to sing. And on the other hand, just because everybody else is falling on their asses during these classical concertos, this is your opportunity to show, I'm not afraid of you, I'm not nervous, I'm not gonna rush, I have all the time in the world. And this is gonna make you unique, because everybody.
Can I just say to everybody who's listening to this, when Guy says 99 out of 100, he is absolutely right. It is almost everybody tries to play too fast. And I would say this is not only in classical concertos, although I have very, very strong views about Mozart Allegro and actually how it should not be in any way pressed or rushed, but actually in orchestral excerpts, the orchestral excerpts that are given to you. I mean, all orchestral excerpts are difficult. That's why they're chosen. So, but in the difficult ones that are difficult because they are fast or fleeting, don't play them too fast. If you can play them a little steady and controlled and relaxed, and you can play it accurately, then you could play it faster. You don't need to prove to the panel that you can play fast. There are so many examples of that. Laura?
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree. Look, we, the member of the jury, we're like dogs. If we smell that you are afraid of us, we're gonna bite.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, try to show you are comfortable and you're not afraid of anybody. And just between us, if you don't feel this way, act this way. Just pretend. Don't run.
Yeah.
Show you're comfortable. It's gonna make you very unique, because I was very careful with the 99 out of 100. Maybe it's even more rare than that. Somebody is coming and show, I have all the time in the world. I'm not afraid of you. You don't make me nervous. And that's the most impressive feeling you can give to the jury.
And actually, I want you to listen to me.
Yeah.
That's not big-headed. I want you to listen to me. I want to share music with you. Laura, what about you?
I totally agree about the tempi. I mean, just to have the time for everything really to speak is so rare that things don't run away themselves in classical concertos. And I think also, often I think people can view it as a bit of a warm-up to the main event, really, somehow. I'm just going to play this before I play my Tchaikovsky or Brahms or Sibelius or whatever. But actually, it's the most pure opportunity to show your imagination and to show your voicing and your characters and all those wonderful things that are actually what are so engaging about hearing someone for the first time. And I think it should really take most of your focus in terms of that, because it's what we remember the most, isn't it? Let's face it, we don't remember really, so
absolutely.
I certainly don't remember loads of Brahms concertos, but I really remember the classical concertos that I loved hearing and that made a real impact on me.
Yeah, it's Laura. It's like Tinder, It's like this dating. The first impression is sometimes what most people remember, especially if you date so many people, like we do in an audition. We can hear 50 of them, and you really a lot of time only remember the first 4 or 5 bars. Just because there's too much information.
I would go even further than that. I did a day of auditions for first horn, principal horn position. And the horn players were all asked to play Mozart 4, Mozart 4. And so by the end of the day, I had heard 35 Mozart 4s, and I'd sort of lost the will to live, really, because none of them made me sort of sit up and think, oh God, this is amazing. And at the very end of the day, a guy came in. He just looked at us, said, good afternoon, walked over to the piano, said, can I have an A, please? The pianist played an A. And he just took his time, put the horn to his lip, and he played an A. And we all looked at each other and said, it's him. And it was, and it wasn't even just the way it wasn't just the sound quality of the A or the purity of the production of the note. It was his attitude. We just said, this man is in control.
Yeah.
This man really knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then, yes, he played the concerto better. But when you say you've made up your mind in the first 4 bars, we'd made up our minds before he'd even started. Just extraordinary. So that's a.
Let me just go back to what we spoke about maybe 20 minutes ago. When I say the first 4 bars are the ones that matter the most, I do not mean you have to be nervous that you have to play them perfectly. I do not.
Yes.
This doesn't matter. Not the impression that will stay with us.
Yes.
It's if you are an interesting personality that has an interesting story to tell, using the instrument.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I just say to our audience, I think the questions that are coming are absolutely fantastic. And actually, this is what I hoped for in this session, was that it would become you asking the panel stuff. So please keep your questions coming in. It's terrific. One from Carolina, who we know. Hi, Carolina. I have heard about playing an excerpt with a member of the orchestra as part of the audition in order to see how responsive the candidate is in terms of ensemble playing. What are your views on this idea, and do you think that it should become a common practice of all the auditions?
I've certainly heard of that too, particularly when there are stages to the auditions, and maybe in the latter stages. I mean, you can sense that by hearing them without having to play with them, I think. And certainly in my orchestra, that's the trial process. That's when you get to feel those sort of things. So I wouldn't say it's that necessary. I think you instinctively know whether or not someone, you know, I mean, that's all part of accepting someone from an audition, isn't it? Whether you actually really want to play with them. You know, can you imagine playing? Would you want to play with them? Could you imagine them really contributing, that other people around would want to play with them too? So I don't think it would necessarily be a requirement, but I have heard also of it being quite common.
I mean, I'm interested in this as particularly with the sort of viewpoint of a conductor as opposed to an instrumentalist. When you're a conductor, nobody knows if you can play an instrument well or not unless you are already well known for it. And so you present yourself, to use Guy's words, as a naked person. You have no clothes on. It's just you and your musicianship. And we can all tell as orchestral players whether that conductor has this musicality about them, this collegiate sense of being able to work with their music and with other people. It's like a sort of aroma that comes into the room. And so as a panel member in an audition, when somebody comes in, you don't actually need anybody else there to prove that they can play with other people. Just because there's somebody in the room with you, playing with you, doesn't switch something on in you that makes you suddenly a chamber musician. The panel can actually tell. Where I think it might have a value is in making the candidate feel more at ease by playing, and that's something I would have felt at the time I was doing auditions, but now in hindsight I don't think it would have made any difference to the way I played. What do you think, Guy?
For me, it's also not a very important such an important thing to see. It's so obvious when you hear somebody from the side playing either by him or herself or with the pianist. I think you can have a pretty good idea if you can communicate with this person, yes or no. You have a it's pretty clear to most of us. So I mean, it's not like I have anything against it. I just don't see the necessity.
It takes us that takes us very, very nicely onto Julia's next question, which is, what are you doing when the pianist is not joining your tempo? Now, in a utopian world, the accompanist would always be magnificent, but it's not always the case. And so, absolutely. And so, if you are playing, it's quite alarming if you're playing and the accompanist is not working with you. Now, this could be, for me, one of two things. It could either be that the accompanist is not very good, or it could be that the accompanist deems that you are rushing. And so I guarantee that the pianist will never hurry you. If the pianist does anything, they will slow you down. And it might be the pianist actually trying to help you by saying, look, take it easy. Don't worry, you'll fall off if you run downhill like this. And so, but let's answer Julia's question at face value, which is, do you slow down or speed up to fit with the pianist if the pianist is not playing at the tempo that you want? Really interesting one. I haven't got an answer.
It's a good question. It's a good question. Laura, may I? Look,
yeah.
I had this experience myself. I've seen it all the time in auditions. So I mean, sometimes the pianists are all over the place. Try to pretend you're playing your own recital and see how you can come up with the best way to move forward.
I mean, what I'm reading in.
No, I was preparing a lot of people for auditions, and I would always tell them, if you cannot bring your own pianist and you meet the pianist for the first time in the audition, please, before you start, while they are asked them to give just show them quietly and discreetly the tempo that you like, because they might, you might not like to play as fast as all the other candidates. The pianist cannot guess that. So just show them very comfortable. Not faster than this. You can tell the pianist that. And the thing is, the best musician is it's like the best football player or basketball player is also, it's not only the one that plays the best, it's the one that makes the other people, the colleagues play better. Yeah. If you are musically so clear, the pianist will be with you. Don't worry about it. And if you'll end up fighting with the pianist, it will give the idea that maybe you're not so clear with your ideas.
At the risk of embarrassing her, I'm going to turn that into something I've wanted to say to Laura for many years. Is that Laura, when she was in the Belcher string quartet, was playing second violin, and I, as an observer, I felt that you were the best second violinist I'd ever heard. I say that with one particular regard, and that is that I am a second violinist. I think of myself as a second violinist, as a middle part player rather than the leader, and so I think I understand what second violin playing is all about. Now let's also include second flute, second oboe, second trumpet, second trombone, second horn. If you're applying for a position that is not a principal position, should you, I mean, what Guy was saying about the really fine musicians are the ones who make those around them play better. And that, for me, is the art of playing second violin. It's not being the best player in the group. It's actually making the group gel and making it work. And so if I reflect on my own playing, I would say that I was not a very good violinist, but I was a jolly good second violinist. That's how I felt about my violin playing. And so all of those things that we look for in an audition are even more applicable to the second player. Do you think?
I would absolutely agree. I think in an audition situation, of course, it's ideal if you've had a chance to play with your pianist before and you're really collaborating, but we all know that that's just not necessarily the reality. But from a panel and listener's point of view, you get such an idea of the musician based on how they're reacting to things that might not be going quite as they want. We've all been in situations where we have to play with people that we don't necessarily agree with. That can be if you're playing a second line or a secondary line to a melody And you could very easily think, well, I really don't want to play it like that. I wouldn't choose to play it like that. But you still have to find your own musical voice and freedom within the parameters of how someone else is playing. And I think whether it's a group, whether it's a duo, whether it's an orchestra, we all have to find a way of expressing ourselves in that situation. And that means just being so flexible about what you do. And in a situation like an audition where, you know, a pianist could be going off in a different direction to you, of course, if it's an ideal situation and your clarity of idea is so succinct that you can't not follow that person. But if someone really isn't following you, then you have to be creative about how you can make them listen to you, how you can make this work, how you can make a tempi work for you, even if it's not your ideal or first choice. And I think there are a lot of parallels of that with playing a second instrument, because you're playing a very supporting role, but you also have to have your own voice. And no one wants any second violin or a second anything to be subservient. Far from it. I mean, the best groups are full of life and full of vivacity in all the departments. So I think it's really interesting that we as musicians find a way of expressing ourselves even in our not most comfortable situations. And I think that is what we have to do all the time, particularly in an orchestra. If a conductor asks you to play something at a tempo you really don't like, you have to make it work somehow. You have to find something in it that you can get from that situation, rather than just saying, this is so frustrating, you know, I can't deal with it. You know, so I think in an audition scenario, you learn a lot about a musician if the collaboration isn't always feeling that easy.
Yeah, I certainly, as a teacher of conducting, I will tell students that they should always conduct the melody second. So don't turn to the melody and try and fashion the melody. What you should be working with is the accompaniment, the middle parts, the harmony, the accompanying lifeblood of the music, and then the melody will work. And you see so many people just sort of referring to the top line. So that's very interesting. The next two I'm going to join together, because in a way they ask the same question. This is from Victoria and Iris. And this, I'll read Iris out because Victoria's question is up. Do you think that taking part in many auditions, say week after week, is good for reducing stress or being better prepared? And what Iris says is, what do you think about auditioning for the purpose of practicing auditions? In other words, doing lots of auditions in order to gain practice. Would you rather focus on the orchestras that attract you, or try to do every audition that comes up? So a lot of questions have been asked of me over the years about how many auditions should I do? Should I only do the orchestras that I want? I mean, he's only done one. Do I only do the auditions
I'm sorry. I cannot say from personal experience, but
I did bloody loads.
No, but the question is, if you feel like if you make 10 auditions in a row and each time you play better, be my guest, do 100 of them. But unfortunately, that's not always the case.
No.
You look for your lucky days that you're going to hit your notes and be less nervous, and that really doesn't work.
Yeah,
that really doesn't work. So I mean, just take the very first audition and try to show, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm in good mood and I want to play this beautiful Mozart number 4. And maybe you can learn something from me, maybe. I don't know. But just be comfortable. Don't rush. Whatever you do, don't rush. Because everyone else does.
Yes.
Don't rush. Have all the time in the world. And if it takes you 20 auditions in a row to get discomfort, be my guest. I don't see the necessity.
Yeah, no, that's me too. Laura?
I totally agree with Guy. I mean, you never know when you're going to feel at your most comfortable. So and more auditions don't necessarily equate to that. But I think we're also in a really lucky position to all be violinists, or violinist conductors, you guys as well. You know, if you're a tuba player, you simply would probably do every audition that came, because there aren't so many jobs, and you would simply apply for, you know, or another instrument like that. Whereas we are quite lucky that there will be more auditions, more opportunities, more possibilities, maybe. More moving around of people within jobs, that you could quite comfortably say, well, I won't try that because I'll wait for that or whatever. But I think with different instruments, it's a very different feeling if you know that, you know.
Of course. And me also, I when I was 28, I did not decide, okay, now I would like to get a job. Let's try Berlin Philharmonic. For me, it was the only option. I said, if this doesn't work, I will do other things in my life. So I wasn't about to continue auditioning anyway, one way or the other. I just wanted to play in that position, in that orchestra. And that was it. So I cannot really answer your question. If I can just say my instinct will tell me, show your personality, try to create the optimal comfort zone from the very first audition that you take. Eat the same, sleep the same. Don't try to, you know, I do it all my life, or most of my adult life. It was a bit different when I was younger, before I go and play concerts. You know, when I played my first concert when I was 18 at Carnegie Hall, I thought I'm gonna be shitting in my pants. So you know what I did? I played basketball with my friends in the afternoon, and I took the subway to go to Carnegie Hall instead of taking a limousine or a taxi. I took the subway because this is how I did the previous days for rehearsal. So try to stay in your comfort zone. Don't change your habits, your daily habits, and hopefully you wouldn't even need to make many auditions. Because if you show that you're comfortable, and then you make more beautiful music than the rest of them, and you don't rush like the rest of them, your journey will be over very soon. Trust me on this one.
Can I say a little bit something that I think was in the question about practicing auditions? The only thing I would say about that is, a panel or an orchestra aren't there to be practiced on. You know, if we get a sense at all that you're just kind of going through the motions because you think you want to see what this feels like, but you haven't really taken it very seriously, you know, immediately you just think, do not waste our time. You know, everyone's time is precious. So I think that the concept of just trying as many as you can, just to get in the kind of flow of it, you know, pick them well, you know, don't just, you sense that often when, you know, if someone's coming and they're just trying something out, it feels very disrespectful, going back to the clothes thing, and just feeling that, you know, someone's not taking it seriously.
I would also say, if you have 24 girlfriends, it doesn't necessarily mean that the 24th is easier.
Not in my...
They're all different. Every single one is different. Every single audition you do will feel different. It doesn't get easier. So I don't like the idea. And Laura, you're absolutely right. You can tell the people who are audition tourists, as it were. Yeah.
Never auditions. Never practice auditions.
No, absolutely. So David Dalpiaz, why do you think it's so hard to give applicants the choice of performing a piece of their own choice instead of Mozart concertos? Of course, you would lose the possibility to judge all the applicants on a common piece, but at the same time, you might earn the chance to know better the musician who is playing for you. I asked a question earlier about choice of repertoire, and didn't say one thing which I feel quite keenly, is that you shouldn't choose a piece to show off. It's the other way of looking at it. When you say you choose a piece that sort of shows you at your best, that's one way of looking at it. But don't try and impress the panel by playing a piece that is slightly beyond you, because we can see through that very, very quickly. But in terms of as a panel member, I don't like setting concertos because I don't want to listen to the same concerto over and over and over again, because as a panel member I get quite jaded. Now again, going back to Laura's point, we are very, very lucky as violinists because we have unbelievable choice of repertoire to choose from. But if you're a tuba player, or if you're a bass trombonist, even some wind instruments, wind and brass instruments generally, double basses don't have that many concertos, certainly compared to violins and cellos or violas. And so playing an instrument where there is unbelievable choice is a joy, but actually it's also a hardship because you have to choose the one that is best for you, and that's sometimes quite difficult to find. But I personally, although I think that you can, if you listen to a day of Mozart concertos, you do have the opportunity to compare each player, but I don't think that's of any value at all, because everybody is different. And so you see the differences for what they are, whether they're playing the same piece or different pieces. Also, if you really want something to judge, to equalize people, then that's orchestral excerpts for you. Guy.
Yeah, Davide, I agree with you. I mean, if it was up to me, I would just give each candidate 15 or 20 minutes to do whatever makes you have to play, whatever makes you happier. But it's only you and I, we're in minority. Unfortunately, the majority in almost every ensemble would like to hear these Mozarts, these bloody Mozarts or Haydns or Stammits if you're a viola player, and you name it. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can even play an etude and show how interesting and or how cultivated or how imaginative you are as an individual, and this is what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura?
I agree. I mean, I think my ideal scenario is to have a classical concerto and then a free choice of absolutely anything after that, because just in a very short time, I do think I get to know so much about the person by hearing them playing a classical concerto. But it could be a classical piece or something. I don't think it has to be necessarily in violin's case, Mozart concerto. But to have a totally free program is great, I think, in theory, but I'm probably a bit more boring than that, and I'd like to have a classical start and then something else.
I could understand it, because as a member of the jury, you know, some of us would like to, when you come to, as a member of the jury, you would like to be able to judge based on something that you know. And I would have loved to say, don't play Mozart concerto, choose any Mozart sonata, but most of my colleagues won't even know them. Yeah. So I mean, hearing the same 2 or 3 concertos all the time, everybody knows them by heart, and it makes the jury more comfortable making their judgments based on something that they already know. So I mean, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. If they want to hear Mozart, give them Mozart. If they want to hear Prokofiev, give them Prokofiev. It doesn't fucking matter.
Yes,
Play scale. Just show how happy you are and how not scared you are, and how you have all the time in the world to show that you are special.
And once more, that leads very neatly on to the next question, which is Ricardo Ricci Ortiz Rubio. Brass players usually give more importance to the specific technical skills than to music. Do you think the points that you look for as a jury depend on the instrument, or they end up being all the same? Now, I want to answer that by talking about percussion auditions, because generally, apart from rhythmic inconsistencies or rushing and things like that, you hear many percussion auditions that actually are the same. And so, Ricardo, although you asked the question for a brass player, I'm comparing it to percussion. suddenly you get one person who comes in and you play it like a musical instrument. So suddenly you hear a snare drum solo and you say, oh my goodness, that was phrased so beautifully. And so where you talk about the technique of breathing or the technique of slide work or the technique of the way you address the note, all of those technical things, the sound quality, I do agree that in a brass section, you probably have to think quite significantly about the type of sound that you want, because you belong to an orchestra that has a type of sound. So you're not going to get somebody who sounds completely different. So there can be big sound quality issues there. But actually, my answer is, do you know what we're looking for? We're looking for musicians. Of course, we're looking for technical expertise, but you're looking for musicians. And so whatever you do, don't try and show off technically. Play music, because that's what we're there for. So that's my answer. Laura.
I think that's a great answer, Peter. I think you're only really aware of technique, aren't you, if it's getting in the way of someone not being able to express themselves. I mean, they're not separate things. It's someone wants to say something and they're either able to do that or not. And I think in the absolute best situation, whether it's a concert, audition or anything, you're not aware of the physicality of someone playing their instrument. You're just listening to what they've got to say. I think you're also absolutely right, though, Peter, about specific sounds of orchestras. And I think that, you know, some players and orchestras are just good fits, aren't they? Some people, you can say, I can imagine that sound in that orchestra. I can imagine that, you know, but also we have to be flexible and try and play in so many different ways that someone who's listening to you for the first time could imagine that your sound could join them and maybe could take it in a different direction. So I think you can't try and pretend to be something you're not, but to focus on the technical is really taking away from actually what we want to hear, which is the personality.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, in my lifetime, we went through a period when I was sort of in my 20s when historically informed orchestras started springing up. So you had orchestras that were specializing in Baroque or medieval or classical music. And the symphonic stuff was the province of the symphony orchestra. Nowadays, I think a symphony orchestra has to play in many different styles. So you have to, you know, if you give a symphony orchestra a Mozart symphony today, they will play it stylistically closer to what the guys were trying to establish in the 1980s. So it's very interesting, the historical perspective, and that is part of the sound quality. So if you give in an audition, you give somebody an excerpt from a Mozart symphony, and then you give them something from Richard Strauss, I certainly as a panel member would expect a different sound. And so flexibility in sound quality is much more interesting to me than just trying to find the beautiful sound. I want the imagination in the sound, I think. Guy?
Well, I look, I mean, for me, most of the technicalities when it comes to brass playing or percussion it's like Chinese to me. But let me just give you a story from 7 years ago or 8 years ago when I was in my very last season in Berlin in the orchestra. I remember I had like one day a terrible day. You know, I spilled my coffee twice. And my wife was screaming at me for a variety of reasons. My baby at the time, he peed on me when I was trying to change his diapers, and nothing was working. Even the tax authorities, they sent me an email that I owe them an incredible amount of money. It was definitely not my day. It was not my day. And in this kind of terrible mood, I come to the Philharmonic to play Brahms' Second Symphony. And I really felt this is not my lucky day. But then, you know, the third horn, and the three trombones and tuba, just before the beautiful violin, first violin theme comes. they presented me something so beautiful. They pulled me back. And this is what we look for, even with the tuba players. Or I want them to you know, we are all humans. We all have our bad days. And this is where we depend on our colleagues to pull us out of it. And sometimes it only took 3 notes from the trombones, and it put a smile on my face, and I forgot about all these horrors from the previous hours, and I was ready. They made me play better. And this is when this is exactly when we need our colleagues, regardless of how, if your articulation is more like this or more like that. You know, we just need you to take us on a bad day, on a cloudy day, to bring us back. And sometimes the next day I will be there for you. And this is what I like, even when I hear a trombone audition.
Yeah.
You know, somebody that can present me with something that that is so irresistible that I have to play my best.
Yes.
Not
you
more.
know,
Not more.
I heard a quote the other day, which I just love, and that is that musicians are the dustmen of the soul. Dustman is garbage collectors.
Yeah.
I just think that is amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So in your shit day, when everything is going wrong, you hear a beautifully turned phrase and suddenly everything is clean again. It's just, I think that's a wonderful way of describing it.
Yeah, the tuba player, just before this beautiful theme comes, da, 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 just before that, he gave like 2 notes, just the E and the A, and that's it. And I felt like,
yeah, life is all right.
Yeah, life is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is what we look for in colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely right.
No, you can have your off days, and you can have even your off day exactly, unfortunately, at the very day that you audition for us. But this feeling, I will be able to swim if you can take me on a cloudy day, if you can bring me back, because this is the quality that what we look for and what we can hear, even if you are in your off day.
Thank you very much. Lovely question from Patricia. During your audition preparation, do you play to other people as a tryout? Do you think that's a good way to prepare for the audition? That's an interesting one.
I think it's always, it's always great to play to colleagues and friends, just because it's great to have feedback, isn't it? I mean, I don't know whether it would necessarily make you more prepared, but I think it's just a great way of sharing music. And you know, sometimes when that's in the same way as if you record yourself as well, and you hear things differently, or if you play for someone that you really trust and they give you feedback, you know, they are often hearing things that you might not be experiencing yourself, or you might be experiencing something that's making you see something in a slightly warped way, or you might not be realizing you're doing something. So I think just in life, it's good to play for other people or play for a recording and hear yourself back. But whether or not that really helps with the actual preparation, I think, as we've touched on so much, there are so many factors at play when you do that one audition.
There's another thing which is very interesting, which I think is a very good reason for playing with other people, and that is under the ear. So actually at the point that the sound is produced, you're not always the best person to judge how the sound travels into the room. And so I had an instrument once which sounded beautiful under the ear, and it sounded rich and mellow. It carried nowhere. And I didn't know that until I played on a violin that underneath the ear sort of I found rather shocking, rather strident. Out in the room, they said it sounds much warmer than that one. I said, no, but it can't. It can't. And so that is a very good reason for playing to somebody else. I personally would not recommend just playing to somebody else, other than for Laura's suggestion, which is it's just good to play to other people. But I do think an objective viewpoint as to what you sound like is very valuable, not just to make you feel more comfortable because you're used to playing to other people. Guy, I mean, you had to play a lot of solos for Berlin in your time there.
Well, I mean, I see no difference. I mean, nowadays, at my very old age, I'm still going and playing for people, and sometimes going and taking lessons.
Yeah.
But again, this is me. Whatever is right for me could be very wrong for somebody else. It's a very personal thing. I usually do it with people that I trust.
Yes.
For any people, not just for any people. And sometimes, you know, because Peter, you said sometimes the impression under the ear is misleading. You know, sometimes when I just finished the recording of a CD I made for with BBC Symphony, with Tchaikovsky pieces, I was so much into details, so I had to send the final cut to some few different people that I trust. And I said, you have the perspective, I don't. I hear little details. I see a lot of trees. I don't see the forest anymore. I'm too close to it. So I think it's a good idea, especially if it's people that you can trust.
Yes.
I think also that musical exchange can make you think about things differently, or it can also make you reinforce why you've made those choices. And that's no bad thing, because as we said, you know, we want to hear the most distinct personality when someone comes and plays for us. And that's so magnified, isn't it, if you really are so convinced about what you're doing yourself. And that can be part of the process, talking about those choices with someone else, them challenging you, and exploring all those together.
Yes, yes. Good. Giovanni, where do you draw the line between confidence and arrogance in a candidate, especially in the fake it until you make it mindset? Is it possible to go too far and pass as too confident and therefore not fit for the position?
Yes.
Thank you. Absolutely. Very easy answer. Yeah.
In one word, yes. But I don't think it's such a thin line between confidence and arrogance. It's very obvious for people looking at you. But sometimes we have to fake things. Actually, most of our work is faking and imitating, hopefully imitating the human voice and not other people playing the same instrument. But I don't think that arrogance starts exactly at the same point where confidence ends. There is a very, very distinct difference between these two, and I don't think you can fool the audience or the jury.
Laura?
I think also that the fake it until you make it kind of phrase is very strange, because in a way there is a certain, like Guy said, a certain amount of acting involved in what we do. You know, you might not be feeling really happy, for example, when you have to go out on stage, but you know, it's rude not to smile at your audience, for example. So I think in that respect that you can kind of talk yourself out of a negative thing without remotely coming across as being arrogant. It just is a way of digging yourself out of a situation when you maybe aren't feeling as buoyant or as positive as you might hope to.
I mean, I think I agree with both of you. I think the answer lies in something Guy said earlier, which is in comfort. If you are comfortable as a human being, then you will be you will display as much self-confidence as is necessary, and that doesn't mean lack of criticism. The problem with arrogance is it becomes a veil to criticism. So if you are deemed to be arrogant, it's not a good quality. But a certain element, I mean, I always call arrogance the chili in the recipe. If you have too much of it, the recipe tastes awful, but actually a little tiny bit actually enhances the flavor of everything else. And so the self-confidence that comes with that tiny little bit of arrogance produces something that is imaginative and outward looking and really something everybody wants, but what they don't want is to have it thrust at them. So if you should certainly try and avoid that sort of any element of showing off. And believe me, we see a lot of it. We see a lot of it.
There's a very big difference when someone comes into a room or comes onto a concert platform or a rehearsal situation where you sense that they're very aware of their worth, and that's a very different thing from being arrogant. I think it's reassuring to be around someone that appears to know what they're doing and where they're at, and that's a very different thing from someone coming in and dominating a situation, for example. Yeah,
absolutely. Everybody, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that it's 5 minutes left to the end. If there are any burning questions, now is the time to answer them. I want to start wrapping up by just saying that what I've gained from this, anything you do like this is a learning experience for all of us as well. And so you follow a conversation, you follow an idea, and you learn from it. And the one thing that I've gained from this is that here we have three very different people with three very different perspectives on the world of music making. And yet actually we've disagreed about very little. And I'm just looking at something Marshall has added himself, which it says, great session, guys, thank you very much. But moral, be yourself. And, you know, that is the answer. If you go into an audition, if you are yourself, then people will welcome you, even if they are different from you. Don't try and be something you are not, because we're all after that personality. And actually, if I think about the people who've inspired me in my career, they are all just themselves. And that's sort of the beauty of it. And so I think that is a great moral, Marshall. Thank you. So does anybody, there are no more questions coming in. So I'm going to say thank you from all positions to somebody who I've known for many years, to somebody who I've met today. It's been a great pleasure for me personally. And so thank you very, very much. Oh, Adrian. Hello, Adrian. He's just come in with a question at the finishing post. Do you have any advice on trials? Now, when I was auditioning, all I wanted was a trial. I thought if I get a trial, I'll be okay because I can go in and be myself. I mean, it's a really interesting comparison. But do you have any advice on trials? What, as a concert master, if there's somebody trialing in the orchestra, what are you looking for? It's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
You're trying to get to know someone even more, aren't you? I think one thing I would think about if you're going in for a trial is don't try and please them. You're trying them as much as they're trying you. You know, I think this kind of sense that you know, I should be trying to fit in and do this to please everyone and be super sociable in the breaks and play beautifully and and be on sparkling form all the time. You know, they've also got to make it attractive for you. It works both ways. So I would say, you know, be as sunny as and optimistic as you possibly can, because people, as we've spoken about a lot, people like to be around positive people. But also try and think about whether it's the right situation for you, as well as you being the right situation and the right person for them.
Buying a drink for your principal player is always a good idea, isn't it?
Oh no.
No, absolutely. Yes. Okay, on that note, thank you very much indeed, both of you, and thank you everybody for really, really great questions. Thank you for engaging. So terrific stuff. I will love you and leave you and say bye-bye, and thank you.
Thank you both so much. It's been gorgeous.
Thank you.